The message spewed from the pulpit by many priests is that because the Church's teachings do not give certain rights to the LGBT community, for the state to allow it somehow constitutes a persecution of the Church. Believe it or not, there are a lot of LGBT people in the Catholic Church. These people love their church. Just imagine that, telling someone who loves their church that they would be persecuting it if they so much as well stand up for their basic dignity as human beings. But that is exactly what priests like this do. And for a priest or any religious authority to tell members of his congregation that standing up for their equal rights constitutes participation in the persecution of the Church, that is spiritual abuse, and that is unacceptable. Hello, Internet. This is Red Angel Sophia here. Sorry I've been gone for a while, but I experienced a burnout some time back and had to take a bit time off to reformulate, grow a bit as a person, and determine how to proceed with my channel from here. Interestingly enough, it was while I was gone that my channel finally experienced the first official milestone in channel growth, having reached the 100 subscriber threshold. Thank you very much, everyone, for making this possible, and to boot, having done so at a time when I wasn't really here to thank you in a more timely manner. While I was away, I was making a lot of music. I really like it, as in my songs I get to talk about some of the very same important subjects that I might discuss here, only I get to discuss them a bit more on my own terms. That said, I have no intent whatsoever of abandoning this channel. As a matter of fact, I've realized that I can use my pursuit of music as a possible means by which to do something that I have been trying to do for the past 5 months, to recover from the burnout that has been silencing me all this time. Because you see, one of the advantages to discussing these topics through music is the ability to discuss them on my own terms. However, there is also a downside. Sometimes there may be more information that needs to be said on the topic of one of my songs, information that is best delivered in the format of the kind of video you are watching right now, which is far more similar to, even if not identical to, the kind of stuff that I did on this channel in the past. And now is one such time. Recently I uploaded my first ever music video, Father Spigot, which is for a song about spiritual abuse of LGBT people in the Catholic Church. That video isn't on this channel, but on my artistic channel, a channel which I originally started as a channel for artistic spoken word performances, but which later I started using more for music instead. If you want to see the video, there is a link to it in this video's YouTube video description area, as well as a link to the hyperfollow page for Injustice for All, the album of mine that the song is from. The full album is scheduled for release on March 4th, 2023, but the hyperfollow page is already there, and the music video for Father Spigot is already visible on YouTube. So, with that said, what is the spiritual abuse that the song talks about? I discussed the subject a little bit the other day when I shared my deconversion story with Neil the 604 Atheist, link in this video's YouTube video description area, but I felt that I needed to still do a video here specifically on this subject. The message spewed from the pulpit by many priests is that because the Church's teachings do not give certain rights to the LGBT community, such as, for just one example, marriage equality, for the state to allow it somehow constitutes a persecution of the Church. You heard me right. Their message is that refusing to enshrine church doctrine into the law of the land that binds everyone in society, including people who have no affiliation or shared doctrine with the church whatsoever, constitutes a persecution of the church. Never mind how bizarre this assertion is. I'm focused here on why such messaging is downright abusive. Believe it or not, there are a lot of LGBT people in the Catholic Church, and though there may be some exceptions, for the most part, these people love their church, whether it is because they were raised in the church or whether because they came to the church by other means. They love their church and would never in a million years do anything to hurt the church. That said, these same people are themselves hurt. They are harmed by the way society marginalizes LGBT people, a marginalization that happens at many levels, including in many jurisdictions, the legal level. To campaign for more fair treatment under the law is basic self-advocacy. But the message spewed by priests like Father Spigot is that if you do this, then the policies that you are trying to enact would constitute a persecution of the church, which in turn makes you a persecutor of the church. Just imagine that, telling someone who loves their church that they would be persecuting it if they so much as well stand up for their basic dignity as human beings. But that is exactly what priests like this do. I will never forget the day after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in United States versus Windsor came down. For clarification, this was not the case that made same-sex marriage legal throughout the United States. That would not happen for another few years. This decision merely meant that if your state recognizes same-sex marriage, then the federal government will do the same for you and others in your states. So, what happened the very next day that I will never forget? I was at daily mass, and in his homily, i.e. his sermon, and I do not even remember what his homily as a whole was about, the priest mentioned the persecution of the church, and then he said the following, "And the church is persecuted. Our teaching is that marriage is one man and one woman. Now, anyone can marry anything." And this priest wasn't even in a state that was affected by United States versus Windsor. This was in Tennessee, which is where I lived at the time, a state that would not recognize same-sex marriage until Obergefell versus Hodges a few years later. And here's the real kicker. If this priest's motive was really to highlight that church persecution is an ongoing thing that happens today, as opposed to using that as a thinly veiled cover to bash the LGBT movement, then there was a perfectly legitimate case that he could have used. You see, days before that, in Syria, the bodies of 2 Orthodox bishops were found, bishops who had been decapitated for refusing to renounce Christ. And years later, now as an atheist, I will say point blank, yes, persecution of Christians does happen to this day, and that is not okay. But it does not happen in the United States. And for a priest or any religious authority to tell members of his congregation that standing up for their equal rights constitutes participation in the persecution of the church, that is spiritual abuse, and that is unacceptable. And no, I do not give a rat's fork what scripture or other evidence of religious tradition you can produce in effort to attempt to excuse this behavior. Abuse is abuse, and abuse is never okay. And I know full well, hashtag not all priests are like this. That is true, but one priest being like this is one too many, and I seriously doubt that it is just one priest. You've heard, no doubt, lots about the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, specifically abuse of minors, and you've heard about how the church is not really doing enough to deal with the problem. But one first step that the church has done with regards to sexual abuse is acknowledge that when it happens, it is not a good thing. You may feel that I'm drawing the bar very low when I say at least to something like that. That feeling you may have is probably because that measure falls drastically short of the bare minimum of what the church ought to be doing about it. So why do I say at least to the church merely acknowledging that sexual abuse, when it happens, is not a good thing? Because even that woefully inadequate measure is more than the church has done with regards to the spiritual abuse of LGBT people. Anyway, I am going to skip the Ko-Fi pitch for now in hopes that I will soon be back to a more regular update schedule. I am not sure exactly how frequently I will update this channel going forward, but I do not expect it to be another 5 or 6 months till you hear from me again. And furthermore, there is an exciting new series that I am trying to get off the ground on this channel, which I will tell you more about when I am to the point of being sure that it is a go. Nonetheless, whatever my new schedule is, I'm going to hold off on my Ko-Fi pitch for this video, hoping that I will know a bit more about my future upload schedule soon, as well as other aspects of my plans for this channel going forward. And hey, if you really want to support me financially, then listen to my album when it comes out and get others to listen to it too. I do not know exactly how much money I will get if you listen, but somehow I'm sure that if any track from the album makes the top 40, there is a chance that I might see some money from that. So I have in this video's YouTube video description area a link to said album's hyperfollow page, as well as a link to the music video for Father Spigot. And as previously stated, the full album is scheduled for release on March 4th, 2023, but the hyperfollow page is already there, and the music video for Father Spigot is already visible on YouTube. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and until next time, see ya!